You are being offboarded, Spencer stated, tapping his tablet device as if he were simply selecting a new playlist rather than effectively decapitating someone's long and dedicated career. The conference room smelled strongly of brand new carpet and stale ambition, a suffocating mixture that perfectly summarized the current state of Zenith Systems. He sat there in his ridiculous linen blend blazer, colored a predictable shade of light blue, just like all these startup executives wore when they were desperately trying to seem both highly professional and casually approachable. His hair had that freshly cut, over-gelled sheen, looking as though he was constantly auditioning for a high-end pharmaceutical advertisement. "I am sorry, what did you just say?" I asked, not because I did not hear him clearly, but because my brain was actively buffering the sheer absurdity of the statement. Offboarded. Not fired, not laid off due to budget cuts, just offboarded like a malfunctioning wireless speaker that no longer connected to the corporate network. "It is absolutely nothing personal at all," he said, flashing me the exact kind of empty, synthetic smile you would normally reserve for a neighbor whose dog had just passed away. "We are simply flattening the organizational structure across the board. No more vertical silos, you know. We are aiming for cross-functional synergy and all that modern corporate philosophy." He paused dramatically to take a slow sip of his green smoothie, some horrendous abomination of blended kale and expensive protein powder, and then he gestured vaguely toward the human resources representative sitting quietly beside him. She looked absolutely miserable, as if she desperately wanted to crawl into the large fake ficus plant positioned awkwardly in the corner of the room. "We fundamentally believe that relationship manager roles are entirely outdated in the current ecosystem," he added, actually using air quotes with his fingers, like a reviewer critiquing a subpar kitchen appliance on the internet. I blinked slowly, letting the words sink in. Outdated. I had dedicated 6 long years of my life to Zenith Systems. "You know, that expansive digital platform that allows major hospital networks to manage sensitive patient data securely across various state lines? That massive infrastructure was entirely my vendor relationship. I had meticulously built the damn compliance pipeline from absolute scratch, dragging it successfully through 3 grueling security audits, 1 massive cloud server outage, and an actual terrifying ransomware scare that we completely smothered before the board of directors even caught a whisper of it, and now, according to this arrogant executive, I was just expired goods." "I see," I replied, making absolutely sure my voice did not crack even a fraction of an inch. I did not let him see any weakness. He slid a thick manila envelope across the polished mahogany table as if we were acting in some poorly written spy movie. Inside was my exit paperwork, a downright laughable severance agreement that offered practically nothing, and a pre-written social media post that I could supposedly feel free to edit, announcing that I was stepping away to explore exciting new opportunities. It even came with suggested hashtags. I signed absolutely nothing. Not yet. I stood up slowly from my chair. I looked carefully around the room, but nobody dared to meet my eyes. Cowards, every single one of them. These were people I had eaten soggy conference room sandwiches with, people I had sat beside through god-awful vendor demonstrations that lasted for hours. I had even stayed late on countless Friday nights to help debug complex billing issues that were never ever part of my actual job description. But I did it anyway because the work truly mattered to me. Because I believed we mattered. But apparently that was no longer the case. I was considered a relic of the past, like a dusty fax machine or a person with an actual moral backbone. Spencer gave me a condescending nod, looking exactly like a man who had just successfully taught a puppy to sit on command. "No hard feelings, right?" he asked. "Nope," I said, and I smiled. But it was definitely not the kind of smile you give when you are okay with the situation. It was the kind of terrifyingly calm smile you give when you have just remembered something critically important, something that absolutely nobody else in the entire room knew. You see, Spencer was fundamentally wrong about one very specific thing. I was not just a simple relationship manager who organized lunches and sent holiday cards. I was the officially named technical contact for every single major cloud service that Zenith Systems utilized to keep their lights on. The primary cloud servers, the secondary backup nodes, our entire compliance dashboard, our strict security certifications, all of it. My personal name was on every single line of those binding contracts, not the company's name. Mine. And there were extremely strict, boring, highly bureaucratic, unsexy rules governing those agreements. Rules that explicitly stated that removing the name technical contact without following the proper transition protocol would trigger a devastating chain reaction. It was the kind of reaction that starts with absolute silence, then rapidly turns into a total system outage, and finally results in a catastrophic breach of contract. I had personally written those rules to ensure compliance. I had memorized those rules to protect the company. I walked slowly back to my desk. I did not shed a single tear. I did not slam any drawers. And I did not frantically pack my belongings into boxes like some tragic character in a dramatic movie scene. I simply sat down in my ergonomic chair, logged securely into the main administrator portal, and carefully followed the official offboarding checklist. My offboarding checklist, the very one I had meticulously created 3 years prior. I removed all of my administrative credentials cleanly and efficiently. No drama, no angry notes left behind. Then I securely logged out of the system. I picked up my little desk cactus, a small gift that Nancy from the legal department had given me after I managed to fix the broken contract interface last year. I tossed my personal backup drive into my canvas tote bag. And then I simply walked out of the office. Not a single person said goodbye to me. They just stared intently at their glowing computer screens, pretending to work hard, pretending not to hear the metaphorical thud of the guillotine dropping right behind them. But that was perfectly okay, because the real deafening noise would arrive the very next morning. A decade of my professional life had been reduced to a single tote bag, and the cold knowledge that I had just been replaced by someone whose greatest lifetime achievement was completing a short online management course and managing to marry the chief executive officer's daughter. You become a literal ghost the moment you are no longer considered useful to the corporate machine. The silence was deafening, but it was the silence before the storm. I walked slowly past Brian in the finance department. He physically flinched as I approached, looking as though he was terrified I might ask him for a tissue, a comforting hug, or perhaps a signed legal affidavit to support a wrongful termination lawsuit. Megan from operations suddenly discovered something utterly fascinating on the tips of her expensive leather shoelaces, refusing to look up as my shadow crossed her desk. Even Oliver from the legal team, a man who had once spent 2 solid hours drunk crying to me about his messy divorce at a mandatory company retreat, just tightened his wireless earbuds and walked briskly right past me without a single word of acknowledgement. Good, I thought to myself. Let them all squirm in their own discomfort. I reached the heavy glass doors of the main lobby and pushed my way out into the glaring afternoon sunlight. The warm air smelled sharply of hot concrete and burnt coffee from the cafe next door. Somewhere 2 blocks over, a stressed businessman was yelling aggressively into his mobile phone. A massive delivery truck honked its horn loudly in the busy intersection. The world was still turning, completely indifferent to the fact that my entire career at Zenith Systems had just been abruptly terminated by an arrogant nepotism hire. I turned my mobile phone completely off and dropped it carelessly into my canvas tote bag. No dramatic slamming of doors, no angry tears streaking down my face, but deep inside my mind, inside I was meticulously rewinding every single little detail of the last 6 years I had spent at the company. I remembered the rigorous security audits I had personally led, the massive stacks of compliance documents I had carefully reviewed and signed, the critical industry certifications I held entirely alone, strictly in my own name. And I was silently calculating the hours left on that critical 48-hour compliance clock, as if it were a highly explosive device I had deliberately planted in the company's server room, just to prove an architectural point. I did not need to lift a single finger to cause their destruction. I just needed to wait patiently. It is genuinely funny, the specific things you never get any credit for in a corporate environment. No one ever throws you a surprise office party with a customized cake for successfully filling out the incredibly tedious annual security control map all by yourself. There is absolutely no festive balloon bouquet waiting on your desk when you single-handedly manage to get a massive data system back into acceptable scope. after some careless development intern accidentally installed a rogue software plugin intended for external testing. Nobody claps enthusiastically for you when you sit through a grueling 4-hour video call with an exhausted external auditor, painstakingly explaining exactly why access logs do absolutely need to be fully immutable to prevent tampering. But you know exactly who does notice these things. The strict federal compliance watchdogs, the meticulous third-party auditors, the massive vendor organizations, and most importantly, the massive enterprise clients holding multi-million-dollar contracts that literally live and die by the comforting presence of a small green certification badge on their dashboard. That badge essentially says, this specific company takes your highly sensitive medical data security with the utmost seriousness. And for all intents and purposes, I was the living embodiment of that green badge. My mind flashed back to exactly 3 years ago. I was crammed into a tiny, claustrophobic phone booth with a rapidly dying laptop battery, speaking with an aggressive external auditor on speakerphone. We were slowly walking through the incredibly dense chain of custody clause in our primary security scope. The auditor, who was clearly several cups of coffee, too deep into his own sense of self-importance, had just directly asked who at Zenith Systems held the final, ultimate sign-off power for any technical access changes made to the live production infrastructure. I did not hesitate for even a fraction of a second. "That is me," I stated firmly. He blinked in surprise, his confusion visible even through the grainy web camera connection. "Just you?" he asked, clearly doubting my authority. "Yes," I confirmed confidently. "Per our strict internal policy and our binding vendor agreement, I am the solely named technical contact for all structural changes." It was a policy deliberately baked into the last compliance cycle, immediately following a terrifying security incident that occurred several years prior. That was the massive data breach that absolutely no one in management ever liked to discuss. The catastrophic one where an external contractor pushed a heavily flawed test patch to the live servers late on a Friday night, and nobody noticed until early Monday morning when highly encrypted patient health records were actively being served without proper secure SSH layer protection. I had caught the error, I had fixed the broken servers, and I had made damn sure it would never ever happen again. So, we wrote that specific clause very quietly, burying it deeply under a thick forest of dense legal terminology and complex approval chains. It mandated that all production infrastructure access revocations must be explicitly reviewed and acknowledged by the named technical contact before any changes could be officially validated. That was me. My name, my legal signature, my personal certification account. And now, nobody had bothered to think about removing me properly. They just cut me off, oblivious to the fact that I was the load-bearing pillar holding up their entire facade of corporate security and compliance. Not through the vendor's official compliance transition process, not through the required contact replacement form, and certainly not through the strict audit trail that Zenith Systems was contractually obligated to continuously maintain. They just off-boarded me as easily as if I were a cheap monthly internet subscription plan. The real irony of the situation was that every single year during the mandatory recertification cycle, I would explicitly remind Spencer and the other senior executives of the strict protocols. I would tell them clearly that if anything unexpected ever happened to me, meaning if I got hit by a bus, won the lottery, or simply decided to quit and start a quiet farm in the countryside, someone absolutely needed to submit a fully updated contact form within exactly 48 hours, or they would risk triggering an automatic, catastrophic freeze of the entire platform. Spencer laughed dismissively at me every single time I brought it up. He once leaned back in his expensive leather chair, smirked arrogantly, and said, "We are not running a nuclear power plant here. Evelyn, you need to relax." Well, I did not relax. Instead, I carefully documented everything. I meticulously logged every conversation. I filed multiple redundant backups of every warning email. I kept highly detailed receipts for absolutely everything I did. Because if you work in complex digital infrastructure long enough, you quickly realize a fundamental truth of the industry. Absolutely nobody thanks you when the system works perfectly, but they will immediately blame you the exact second it stops working. So you learn to cover your own tracks quietly, almost religiously. You effectively become the invisible thread holding the massive digital tapestry together. Every single vendor relationship was secured solely by my credentials. Every critical service agreement was personally approved by me. Every complex audit trail, every detailed incident report, every strict password policy, every secure connection update, every single access control chart had a bright red asterisk placed right next to my full name, designating me as the primary contact, Evelyn Harper. Nobody else in the entire company even knew the proper procedure to log into our main compliance dashboard. They just sent me a quick message whenever a quarterly report was due or an anxious client demanded immediate reassurance about their data security. I was their ultimate bulletproof insurance policy. The silent ghost haunting the freezing server room, the only person who vividly remembered exactly why that one specific data storage bucket was never supposed to be touched, and what horrific things happened the last time someone foolishly decided to do so. Now I was completely gone, and that critical thread had officially snapped. They honestly thought they could just cleanly cut me loose without bothering to check what heavy burdens I was actually holding up. That is the fundamental problem with invisible things. They never seem important until they are suddenly not there anymore. Until the heavy roof caves in completely, and absolutely nobody can remember which specific wooden beam was the load-bearing one. By the time I reached my small apartment, I was not even angry anymore. I felt a strange, profound sense of pride that felt both deeply sad and incredibly smug all at the same time. I had successfully made myself absolutely essential in the most boring, unglamorous, totally irreplaceable way mathematically possible. I had effectively become the master lock on the company's most valuable asset, and Spencer had just carelessly thrown out the only key because my cautious attitude did not match his aggressive, fast-paced startup aesthetic. Now, I was going to let him find out the incredibly hard way. The clock was already loudly ticking down. 2 quiet days after my unceremonious exit, I was standing comfortably in my kitchen, making warm pancakes in my favorite pajamas, when the very first little whiff of poetic corporate justice drifted slowly through the air. A good friend from the product development team, let us simply call her Chloe to protect her identity, sent me a text message with the specific kind of vague, adrenaline-laced urgency that is usually exclusively reserved for messy office breakups or surprise government health inspections. "You absolutely did not hear this from me," her message read, "but they are doing a massive, highly publicized investor demonstration on Friday morning. The entire board of directors, plus our biggest clients, plus some prominent tech press. Spencer is calling it a monumental visibility summit." She followed the text with an animated image of someone eating popcorn, and then, bless her wonderful soul, she sent a screenshot of an internal company communication thread. And there he was, Spencer acting in full digital dictator mode, posting aggressive messages to the entire staff. "This upcoming demonstration is our ultimate moment to prove to our wealthy investors that we are fully enterprise ready," he wrote. "The unnecessary fat has been completely trimmed from our budget. We are prioritizing signal over noise. Let us execute this perfectly." The arrogant message predictably ended with a small fire symbol. Another screenshot quickly followed. This one was from the marketing director. "Can we please update the main client dashboard visuals to proudly show 100% server uptime? Also, please ensure we add the official data compliance badge back to the website footer immediately." I actually choked on my hot morning coffee when I read that. They were desperately trying to re-add the highly sensitive security badge that I had personally configured. A badge that ran through a highly secure, verified interface that strictly required an active, named certification contact. A contact which, as of precisely 48 hours after my abrupt departure, was officially suspended pending formal contact verification. That specific badge was not just a simple image file they could paste onto the screen. It was a live, authenticated element. This meant that the exact second the demonstration loaded the compliance page, the system would immediately perform a real-time verification check, and that check was absolutely guaranteed to fail catastrophically. I sat back heavily in my wooden kitchen chair, my feet still clad in fuzzy winter socks, and I let out a sharp laugh. It was not a loud, booming laugh, nor was it particularly manic. It was simply a single, stunned exhale of pure disbelief, very much like the reaction you might have if you watched someone confidently attempt to wipe down a leaking gasoline pump with a brightly lit match. The sheer cosmic irony of the entire situation was absolutely staggering. They were actively using my previous hard work, my carefully constructed digital infrastructure, my rigid security procedures, and my painstakingly maintained automated systems to project a completely fake image of corporate resilience and stability. And every single piece of it was exactly one heartbeat away from violently imploding in real time during their most critical presentation. Let us take a moment to fully understand the immense importance of that specific dashboard. It was definitely not just a simple, attractive user interface designed to look impressive. That powerful tool pulled live, highly sensitive metrics from every single dark corner of our complex back-end server system. It continuously tracked data latency, server uptime, active compliance status, vendor synchronization, and overall system health. It was entirely my own brainchild, born from the sheer exhaustion of sitting through far too many executive meetings, where the sales team had confidently promised technical performance levels that we simply could not mathematically prove. I had built that dashboard from scratch specifically to give our clients total, undeniable transparency. And now it was going to serve them the brutal, unfiltered truth on a shiny silver platter during the most high-stakes, stressful presentation of Spencer's entirely unearned career. My mobile phone buzzed aggressively once again. It was another message from Chloe. "Are you doing okay? I am honestly so incredibly angry for you right now. You literally built this entire system." I typed out a quick response, deleted the entire thing, and then slowly typed again. "Me? Oh, I am completely fine. Just a little bit curious. Did anyone in management happen to formally reassign me as the officially named technical contact in the main cloud portal?" Chloe's response came back almost instantly. "What exactly is that?" she asked. They truly did not know. They had absolutely no idea how their own company functioned. The executive team honestly believed that this massive, intricate digital system ran purely on trendy corporate buzzwords and highly caffeinated espresso beverages. They thought back-end infrastructure was just annoying background noise that you could easily mute whenever the conversation became too technically boring. And now they were confidently marching straight into a live, highly publicized investor demonstration, broadcast globally over a massive video call, with their screens proudly shared for all to see, relying on a glowing dashboard that was currently held together entirely by heavily expired security credentials and undocumented, foolish assumptions. It was the absolute digital equivalent of constructing a massive glass skyscraper and completely forgetting to screw in the foundation bolts. Spencer kept posting relentlessly in the general staff channel, full of toxic, forced pep rally energy. "Huge day coming up tomorrow," he typed rapidly. Absolutely zero margin for human error. He even confidently posted a silly image of a cartoon character running straight off a high cliff, legs spinning frantically in mid-air, still grinning widely before gravity suddenly remembered he existed and pulled him down. They were all still grinning foolishly in the office, but gravity, oh! She was quietly lacing up her heavy steel-toed boots in the background. The destructive pieces were already fully in motion. The invisible countdown timer had officially started, and absolutely nobody, not Spencer, not the highly paid legal team, not the heavily perspiring college intern, desperately trying to refresh the broken compliance badge before Friday morning, had even the slightest clue that the so-called unnecessary fat they had so arrogantly trimmed was the only vital organ keeping the entire massive beast alive. I did not need to plan any elaborate revenge. I simply needed to let the passage of time do the heavy lifting for me. A new email notification abruptly hit my personal inbox, exactly at 7 in the morning. I was halfway through a brisk morning walk, the sun barely peeking over the city skyline. The email was from a very junior data analyst in the finance department, someone fresh out of an expensive undergraduate program who probably still believed that sending quick digital reactions counted as meaningful workplace engagement. The overall tone of his message was incredibly soft and deferential, as if he were politely asking me to bless a minor budget request rather than desperately begging me to save their collective corporate lives. Hello, Evelyn. I sincerely hope you are doing well today. I am so terribly sorry to bother you after your recent departure, but I was just combing through some complex settings for the big demonstration on Friday, and I noticed a few technical toggles in the main security portal that I simply did not recognize. I would love a very quick sanity check from you if you happen to have a brief second. Nothing urgent at all. Totally fine if you are busy. Best regards. He even included a small, polite, smiley face at the end. I stared intensely at the glowing screen for a long moment, then deliberately locked my phone without typing a single word in response. There was absolutely no malice in my action, no overwhelming sense of smugness, just pure, cold discipline. If I replied to him, even just to politely say that I was no longer authorized to advise on internal matters, I would be legally implying some kind of residual support role, and that was the absolute last thing I needed. Right now, total silence was vastly more powerful than providing any clarity. Besides, I was definitely not the one burdened with corporate responsibilities anymore. They had made that specific fact abundantly clear when they handed me that ridiculous severance package. Instead, I confidently walked into a small local cafe, ordered a massive cinnamon pastry, and enjoyed my peaceful morning, knowing that the trap was set. Exactly at 10 in the morning on Friday, the massive video conference call initiated. The digital grid of faces lit up brightly on the screen like a highly expensive chessboard that was about to catch fire. There were wealthy investors dressed in sharply tailored blazers, senior board members sitting in front of professionally blurred home office backgrounds, and the entire executive team from Horizon Healthcare, our absolute biggest enterprise client, positioned prominently in the center of the screen. Their expressions were tight, carrying that specific kind of polite, cordial disinterest that only clients paying tens of millions of dollars can truly afford to display. The overall mood was expectant, professional, and utterly unaware that a massive digital cliff stood mere inches from their polished leather shoes. Zenith Systems' opening slide proudly filled the main screen, boasting words like scalable, highly secure, and perfectly seamless. Three massive lies dressed up neatly as impressive corporate adjectives. Spencer confidently adjusted his expensive microphone and smiled broadly, projecting the unearned charisma of a man who firmly believed he was invincible. "Good morning to everyone," he began, his voice dripping with absolute certainty. "We are absolutely thrilled to show you the next major evolution of our enterprise-grade infrastructure today." I nearly choked on my hot tea as I watched the leaked stream on my laptop. He quickly clicked to the second slide, displaying a heavily bloated bar chart depicting massive quarterly growth. It was undoubtedly copied from an old spreadsheet I had built back when the company still cared about technical accuracy. Behind his arrogant face, the live dashboard pulsed to life. The server uptime charts, the complex interface load speeds, and the active user session rates all smoothly piped through the front end as if everything was perfectly normal. Only, it was not normal at all because I knew exactly what terrifying event was scheduled to happen next. The entire demonstration sequence was rigidly scripted. Right around the seventh presentation slides, Spencer was scheduled to seamlessly switch over to the live client portal to demonstrate our real-time compliance transparency. They had probably tested this transition dozens of times over the past month, but they had not tested it since Tuesday. Not since they fired me. Spencer's cursor floated confidently across the shared screen and proudly clicked the browser tab clearly labeled Client Portal Live. Up popped the familiar, clean login screen. For exactly 2 agonizing seconds, everything appeared to be working perfectly fine. Then the inevitable disaster finally struck. There was a very slight delay, a tiny visual stutter, as if the entire system had suddenly hiccuped, and then a total, catastrophic freeze. Every single dynamic metric widget rigidly locked in place. The processing power usage bar completely stopped moving. The server uptime gauge hung unnaturally at a frozen number, completely unblinking. The critical compliance badge, which was specifically designed to constantly ping the external security servers every 60 seconds, spun wildly on the screen as if it could not decide whether to display a false positive or just completely crash the browser. Then, just like that, a total blackout occurred. The entire shared screen went completely dead gray. There were no helpful error messages, no warnings, just an absolute terrifying digital silence. It looked as though the massive enterprise platform itself had completely forgotten how to exist. I vividly pictured Spencer staring blankly at his frozen screen, his hand completely paralyzed on the computer mouse, his arrogant lips slowly parting into that awful, forced smile people instinctively use when they realize they have made a catastrophic mistake in public. I imagine the wealthy investors leaning aggressively forward in their expensive chairs, the board members furiously furrowing their brows in deep confusion, and the lead executive at Horizon Healthcare tilting his head ever so slightly like a confused dog hearing a strange, high-pitched whistle. Then, the angry questions immediately started pouring in over the audio feed. Is that a local connection issue? Someone demanded, where is the live uptime validation we were promised? Another voice asked sharply. And finally, the specific sentence that cracked the fragile corporate illusion completely in half. Where exactly did your mandatory security compliance badge just go? Spencer nervously stammered over his words. Just a minor temporary technical glitch, he promised weakly. We will have that right back up in just a short moment. But absolutely nothing loaded on the screen. And with every passing second, that empty gray portal became a glaring spotlight on his profound incompetence. Just as he opened his mouth to offer another meaningless buzzword, a brand new video tile suddenly popped into the main view. No one had invited this specific person. But there she was, displaying the calm, professionally unimpressed expression of Jessica Harper, the senior compliance liaison from Data Shield Protocol. She unmuted her microphone with the graceful finality of a descending executioner's blade. Hello, everyone. I sincerely apologize for the unexpected interruption, she announced, her sharp voice cutting clearly through the rising panic. Data Shield has officially initiated an emergency. Total suspension of all Zenith Systems enterprise dashboard services due to a severe compliance lockout. Absolutely nobody moved. The solely named technical contact for all active security certifications resigned earlier this week, she continued, reading calmly from a prepared clipboard. Per our strict contractual protocol, no updated contact information was submitted within the mandatory 48-hour window. As a direct result, your certifications are no longer active, and you are currently completely out of compliance with the rigid standards listed in your master service agreements, including your specific contract with Horizon Healthcare. Gasps echoed loudly across the call. Spencer turned completely pale. The chief executive officer, Richard Vance, leaned furiously into his camera and yelled, "Wait, what does this mean?" The lawyer from Horizon Healthcare did not miss a beat. It means your contract is in material breach, he stated coldly. All future payments are officially on hold, effective immediately. I quietly closed my laptop in my kitchen. The massive financial collapse had officially started, and the multi-million-dollar illusion was completely shattered. They had built their entire empire around the absolute necessity of bulletproof compliance. Yet they arrogantly discarded the only person who actually maintained it. I did not need to shout or send angry emails. I had built the foundational lock, and when they threw me away, they lost the only key. The devastating corporate fallout would completely destroy the company within weeks, proving that true power rarely wears a linen blazer.